Hello and welcome to the Data Engineering Podcast, the show about modern data management. Have you ever woken up to a crisis because a number on a dashboard is broken and no one knows why, or sent out frustrating Slack messages trying to find the right dataset, or tried to understand what a column name means? Our friends at Atlan started out as a data team themselves and faced all this collaboration chaos. They started building Atlan as an internal tool for themselves. Atlan is a collaborative workspace for data-driven teams, like GitHub for engineering or Figma for design teams. By acting as a virtual hub for data assets ranging from tables and dashboards to SQL snippets and code, Atlan enables teams to create a single source of truth for all of their data assets, and collaborate across the modern data stack through deep integrations with tools like Snowflake, Slack, Looker, and more. Go to dataengineeringpodcast.com/Atlan today, that's ATLAN, and sign up for a free trial. If you're a Data Engineering Podcast listener, you get credits worth $3,000 on an annual subscription. When you're ready to build your next pipeline and want to test out the projects you hear about on the show, you'll need somewhere to deploy it, so check out our friends over at Linode. With their managed Kubernetes platform, it's now even easier to deploy and scale your workflows, or try out the latest Helm charts from tools like Pulsar, Pachyderm, and Dagster. With simple pricing, fast networking, object storage, and worldwide data centers, you've got everything you need to run a bulletproof data platform. Go to dataengineeringpodcast.com/Linode today, that's LINODE, and get a $100 credit to try out a Kubernetes cluster of your own. And don't forget to thank them for their continued support of this show. Your host, as usual, is Tobias Macy, and today I'm interviewing Telmo Silva about ClicData. So, Telmo, can you start by introducing yourself?
My name is Telmo Silva, and I am the CEO and CTO of ClicData. And ClicData is a business intelligence platform, data management platform as well, that basically allows any size business, small, medium-sized business, or large corporations to basically incorporate their data into a single data warehouse, create visualization, and publish that out to the wider audience.
And do you remember how you first got involved in the area of data?
Absolutely. I remember exactly the day, in fact, that I said, I got to stop working for this large corporation that at the time I was working for, a large pharmaceutical global company. And after working with them for 5 years and traveling across 40 countries, hiring an army of consultants and internal people to support Oracle data warehouses and buying visualization tools like Tableau and Spotfire and things like that, and being totally depressed 6 months after implementing that in one of the affiliates or one of the business units, going back and seeing all the customers still using, all the business users using Excel. And that frustrated the crap out of me. And that basically came to that point in time, that realization to say something is not right. We've been doing business intelligence for years, and still, after spending millions of dollars in both services and interfaces, scripting, database licenses, servers, and whatnot, and we're still here. We're still using Excel, and people still don't trust or are not being satisfied by what we call business intelligence as it is today. And that's the day that I decided to jump off and saying, you know what, I'm going to stop whining about other people's applications and problems, and I'm going to create my own application, and so that I can whine about it myself. So there you go.
And so you mentioned that ClicData is a business intelligence platform, and from the looks of it, it seems to be sort of an end-to-end option versus a lot of the more narrowly scoped tools that people might call business intelligence, like Tableau or Superset or some of the previous generations like Pentaho. And I'm wondering if you can just describe a bit more about what it is that you're building at ClicData and why it is that you decided that you wanted to spend your time and energy on this particular problem domain.
Yeah, you're absolutely right when you mention, the narrow scope versus this is what marketing does to us, right? Remember the days of Web 2.0 and big data and IoT, and still people have no idea what that means. Machine learning is another one, artificial intelligence, right? And then when you get down to it, what is business intelligence, right? Is it just the visualization piece? Is it the data warehouse piece? When we talk about data lakes, data warehouses, data marts, what are all these pieces, right? People just throw away these terms left, right, and center. And ultimately, for a medium-sized business, or any business for that matter, before starting to predict the future and use advanced statistics and predictive analytics to kind of figure out where they're going, all they really want is something that explains the past, right? And, many years after, we're still chasing this holy grail of, can we have a stable reporting system that people don't have to log into every day to find out where they are, but, proactively tells them, this is where you are, this is where your business is at, the areas where you need to look at, right? Simply. But visualization has never been the issue, right? We have amazing graphing platforms. I mean, even Excel has evolved over the years to create beautiful charts. And if you want to go all the way down to D3, GS, and create your own amazing and creative visualizations, you can do that, right? All those things are possible today. Visualization is not the issue, or at least not the only issue. Where we spend most of the time, 60-70% of the time, is really massaging and treating the data and making sure the data talks, right? We love the cloud, but the cloud has created another barrier for users to get to their data, right? How hard is it to get your Facebook data out? How hard is it to get your LinkedIn data out? And if you're having a hosted database on Amazon or Azure, do you have the keys to go through, all the firewalls and so forth to get to the data? Of course not. That's protection. But you're removed now. You're much more removed than you were before. And the promise of APIs is another one of those things that went the wrong way. Oh, you have a REST API? Okay, then it's fine. And no, of course it's not fine. Not one REST API is built the same way as another REST API. There's different understandings of standards. So all these challenges make it so difficult for a business user and even an IT department within a company to assimilate all this data and create a data warehouse with all the relevant data that is needed to report on. The crux of it is visualization is not independent. Tableau by itself is useless if you don't have a database for all the terms that you want to use, data warehouse, data mart, whatever you want to call it, data storage that has clean data properly updated frequently, right? And that's been our goal. We built connectors, native connectors to as many systems as we can to feed that database and to create a catalog of data that may or may not be related to each other that can then feed the data visualization and then furthermore down processes. And in that, we've connected both ends of the world, right? The ETL tools such as Informatica and Talent, all the way down to the databases, Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, all the way to the data viz tools like Excel and Tableau and Spotfire, all the way down to the portals such as SharePoint and other things, right? So again, the whole gambit of tools is now all within the same platform with APIs where data lineage is assured. You know where that data came from, where it started and where it ends. And that's really was our holy grail. That was our vision, huge vision. But I felt that was the only way we could solve this problem.
The idea of business intelligence is not just the terminal point of I have a graph, I can see, what is my trend of sales over the past 6 months. Like that's not the entirety of business intelligence. That's just what somebody sees when they look at the dashboard. Like business intelligence, as you said, is the entire operation of getting to the point where you can answer that question. And I'm wondering if you can just characterize what you see as being the current state of the market for business intelligence and where it stands now, given the fact that it is decades old and has gone through several generational shifts, and maybe talk about the technical and organizational capabilities and systems that are necessary to be able to effectively run a properly engineered business intelligence system that is not just a dashboard at the end of the day.
Right. No, I frankly don't believe. I mean, there are some new players on the market like ourselves that bring a product similar to ours. I do not believe that today much has changed. I mean, Tableau has been recently acquired by Salesforce. Looker has been acquired by Google. I mean, all these are acquisitions of technology and potentially people, but in essence, nothing much has changed. If you want to implement these tools for the data visualization, because ultimately business users, they don't care about your SQL script interfaces, API REST, and databases. They care about those charts at the end of the day, right? And how they can make decisions. By the way, I don't believe that BI ends with those charts. I think that's just the beginning of BI, in fact. And we can talk about that and those ideas a little bit later, but I think that there's more to it than just the charts. But nonetheless, going back to the current players, I don't think much has changed in the fact that if you want to do things proper, you have to have these connectors to go suck your data out from different systems to put it in different staging areas and the data warehouse, and that you need some processing of that data to cleanse it, to make it match against each other. And all these requires tools, interfaces, coding, and potentially a lot of internal people or external people to make it work properly. The scheduling, the backups, the security, you name it. You have to put all that in place if you want to do a solid business intelligence, or rather, let's not even call it business intelligence. Let's just call it, let's make this company data driven, right? You're building a tool where you are easily able to reach the data, to treat the data, and to analyze the data. That's really all we're trying to do to the business users, right? Because as soon as you think you have the business figured out, they're going to throw another monkey wrench at you and say, but now I want to see it this other way, right? Because my competitor has changed, or because the market conditions has changed. Oh, COVID came into play. Okay, now we have to change our entire forecast. Can you give me the numbers? All these things are dynamic, and people think, especially us engineers, sometimes we think we want things cookie cutter, right? We want stable business processes so we can code against. But the truth of the matter is that that is a fallacy, right? Stable in business is something that never happens. New change in management, new acquisitions, the market, it's constantly evolving. So by creating a data-centric kind of approach to it and saying, yeah, data is really the key. And once the visualization has to be flexible enough to handle these things. But that entire pool of tools and technology has to be very easily accessible. So yeah, I don't think much has changed with the traditional players today. And that's why ClicData, in fact, is enjoying the success that we are. But there are other players in the market as well, which have very interesting items to bring to the table as well. And some that even go beyond just traditional business intelligence, such as predictive analytics, automated predictive analytics, which is pretty cool to see as well, right?
To your point of the sort of dynamicism, that also brings into question how you are structuring the data in the storage layer that is actually driving these charts. And then you also made some good points about the visualization is not the end goal. That's just a step in the path of actually making the data useful, because just saying, okay, I see a chart, that doesn't do anybody any good if I don't know what to do with it. And that's also another major trend that's been happening in the past few years, is people realizing that, just because I'm able to give you a chart of our sales projections for the next 6 months, you have to do something about it to actually realize those projections. And so, where's the button to say, do the thing?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people have talked about embedded analytics, which was the simple fact of placing a chart inside another application, right? So it's closer to your transactional application, right? So if you're talking about a medical system or about an invoicing system, as you enter your invoicing, you see right beside a little dashboard or chart of the invoices for this client, so you can provide better support and so forth. And that's a great notion. Any decent BI system needs to have that. But there's the other side of it as well, is why don't we have embedded applications or embedded data management inside dashboards as well? So we can also look at ClicData, for example, where you can build a dashboard with a lot of charts and visual elements, but right beside a data form that the user can say, well, this is not looking great, so I may want to change my projections for the next month. And immediately on the dashboard, enter data that gets sent back to the database behind the scenes that immediately recalculate their projections right on the spot. So this is a slightly different approach than what most have taken. So I believe there's a lot of room like that for innovation around all items within BI. I mean, if you think about it, except for Stephen Few bringing the bullet chart, I don't know how many years ago, 15 years ago, no additional innovations on data viz has come along, right? Very few have innovated visualization, the same way that very few have innovated, if you look at it, databases as well. We talked about in-memory processing. I think that was one of the big things back a few years ago. We talked about columnar store of databases. We've talked about ADAP and all these different, data lakes and NoSQL type of databases. We've talked about vertical and horizontal scaling of databases. But this has been around for a long time, right? Everybody knows, put the data in memory, it's faster than on disk. Yeah, that's in memory. Like caching has been around for ages, right? But has there been any major strides in terms of bringing data faster, and not by simply throwing more workers and scaling cloud and putting more electricity into all these CPUs, right? There's got to be also an intelligent way of analyzing this data, including recent technologies. PostgreSQL has done a phenomenal job in moving the scale in terms of improving their performance and trying to innovate within the limits of databases. But nonetheless, there's still a lot of room for innovation in these areas, in my view. And I think what it requires is players again like ourselves, which try to do the maximum they can on both sides of the fence to kind of push the limits of the current technology. Yeah, so that's definitely something I'm looking forward is to see what else can we do. Let's stop looking at this just as you say at the pretty charts at the end. What else can we do with these things, right? How can we get the users more involved? How can we get the technology more involved?
And as businesses are trying to realize these capabilities or build out a business intelligence system, what are some of the complexities and challenges that they might face in either building it themselves, or if they do decide to go with a vendor solution, understanding what the various options are actually going to provide for them?
Based on our experience with our customers, a lot of their challenges is mostly in the data acquisition stage. They're very stuck, for lack of a better word. I have my data in system XYZ, it's cloud hosted, or, it's provided by a certain vendor. And they don't give me the keys to the database, right? It's not something that I can, easily tap into. Typically, it's an API, or there's way too many security along the way. So how do I tap into this information? This is my data, and yet I can't reach it. That's challenge number one for any business, right? So that's the first step. They will need to potentially look at developers or look at some sort of a data broker software of sorts that has connectors for their systems that they're in use, and that can bring it back in a format that is digestible for them, right? Failing that, most likely, and this is what 80% of them do, they just do exports. Every major application to a certain extent has a little export feature somewhere that can export into CSV or Excel, some or partially some data or their entire data set. And that's the process they will have to live with, basically, to export every time they want to do analysis, to export it and kind of redo all their entire processes to get to the end. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is if you have to do that across more than one data set, and you have to kind of start cleansing and matching the data, right? Do businesses have the required skills to know a little bit about SQL, potentially if they put that on a database? If they stick with Excels and whatnot, are they experts enough to do things like X lookups and V lookups on Excel and kind of start managing things a little bit homemade, in a homemade fashion? And is that really a repeatable and profitable thing for them to do, right? If you're a doctor or if you're in a profession where you can bill $100 an hour for doing your job and you're spending 2 hours copying and pasting data with Excel, that's $200 of your billable time that, for what? For you to get a pretty chart at the end, right? Which, in a sense, what you need to do to achieve that. And you'll get faster with time, but it's a challenge for them, right? They don't want to do it. That's not what they want to do their business for. And the third challenge is actually visualization. We have a lot of clients that come in and saying, we love 3D charts. We love all kinds of fancy charting and everything else. And we always try to help them along the way. Does a pie chart really fit? You have 500 categories. You're going to see 500 little pie slices. Is that something you really want to do? Will you be able to make an informed decision based on that when your pies, are basically an eighth of an inch, wide there on the upper end? So again, visualization is not for everybody, and presenting, some people try to put too much into the dashboard. So again, in my view, it's a true career or a true academic effort to know how to properly visualize data, in my view. It's no different than any other of the sciences that we have, how you should visualize data, how you need to bring attention to the things that matter. And then The fourth piece is the automation of all of this. You really don't want to do this over and over and every day and every week. You have a team of 5 people, 10 people, and you have to continuously email them manually your cool dashboards. It's just not worth it. So how do you automate that, and how can you script it, right? So that scripting, that word alone invites you to say programming. Are these business users programmers, or do they have teams that can program? If they do, then that's fine. And that becomes a cost center for them. Or they externalize that, right? But in this day and age where you can Zapier and do cool things like that, can't we make those things simpler as well? So again, those 4 challenges to me are probably the biggest ones that they face among others, but those are also the ones we're trying to solve for them.
So can you describe a bit about what it is that you have built at ClicData and some of the ways that you've architected the platform to be able to make those different challenges scalable and maintainable for you so that you can provide them as a service to your customers?
One of the things we decided earlier on is we wanted to go with a global cloud provider because we quickly understood that, and this was already a few years ago before GDPR, before the California Protection Act, before, protection of data became a very, very hot topic. It was a hot topic. It's always been a hot topic, but in recent years, it became even more so. One of the things we wanted is to make sure that we had distributed storage across the world. So we needed to go with a big, large scale provider, either Amazon or Azure. So we've selected Azure for a variety of different reasons, namely because we use .NET technology in many of our applications. Other times because, we felt that, we had a very good affinity with SQL Server, and we've modified a lot of things to work with SQL Server in a more performant way. So we felt that was the right approach for us. So that was the first thing. We went with the large cloud provider. The second thing is we wanted our application to be architected in such a way that it was highly scalable in the areas of how the tasks are processed, where those are data treatment or data loading tasks. So we wanted to, even before the word microservice came along, one of those great words that goes with technology, we wanted to create this concept of micro tasks that have very specific tasks to do, very narrow as much as possible, that we can duplicate and replicate across the different data centers that we host ClicData for our customers. So also, the proximity of the data to the application, it was very important to us. So we wanted to make sure that our application was delivered in sort of what we called internally bubbles. Some people call them clusters, but at the same time, talk to each other, because we realized that some of our customers are international customers, and they do require that data to be present in one country, but yet still be performant and accessible in other countries. So we wanted to make sure that our dashboards were accessible, that the data, that the application itself was accessible. And the last piece is we did not want one single downloadable, fat client installed. It's not because we don't like Windows or Mac or Linux. It's just because we wanted browser. And we were lucky enough, unlike, Tableau's and other companies that started many years before us, they had one technology, right? They had built for Windows. That's most likely where you need to be. The browsers were completely non-standard. Flash was rampant all over the place, right? Silverlight was confusing everybody, right? So we started at a time where the world was made simpler, at least the internet world was made simpler, by substantially simpler. It's still complex, but by things such as no more Flash, no more Silverlight, everything is HTML5, whatever, again, that standard meant to some. But there was a huge standardization based on the Chromium engine, Firefox, and Safari. We had 3 browsers basically to deal with, as opposed to the infinity that we had before and the little quirks. In the grand scheme of things, we came at the right time as well, where cloud was accepted. Platforms such as Salesforce already broke the mold in 2005, and they've been building trust across different industries for many years. So when we started, we were at the right time. Building for the browser is a huge architectural advantage, right? Because now we can offer this to all the platforms, right? We love the Macs, right? There's organizations, even government institutions, that 40% of their employees and their users are Mac users, and yet they can't run Tableau, right? They can't run the desktop. It's Windows only, right? So we were, again, adamant about everything has to be browser-based. The designer of dashboards, the ETL tool, the management of their data warehouse, the whole thing, all one application, full 100% browser. So all those things put together kind of made up the DNA of what ClicData is, right? There's a lot of small things underneath, right? How do we process data faster, right? How do we make these data acquisitions a little bit smarter, more intelligent, right? Does everybody understand what pagination is on an API? And do they know how to request a refresh token of OAuth or not, right? We made all that work for them behind the scenes. They don't need to know that stuff, right? We take care of them. You want to connect to this system? Okay, no problem. We know that API. We know how to refresh tokens, how to page the data, and how to bring the data into your data warehouse clean. So there's a lot of intelligence in that area that it's kind of hidden away from our customers.
An interesting parallel to what you're building is the idea of the modern data stack, where each of these different concerns are basically a different SaaS provider. So you're using Fivetran with dbt Cloud and Looker to be able to do your end-to-end system. And I'm wondering what you see as the advantages that you're able to realize by virtue of being the sort of end-to-end system of collecting the data from the source systems through to delivery and analysis of the information, and some of the optimizations that you're able to build into that full architecture because you have awareness of what all the operations are at each of those stages versus having them be decoupled with a very loosely defined interface.
I think there's 2 points there. The first one is if you look at an intra-customer scenario, right, where a customer loads, let's say, Facebook data, page likes. We know that the customer has made this connection. We know what the data looks like. We have actually formatted the data. So when it comes to the visualization side, we're not going to propose a visualization that is not pertinent to that type of data set. We can be a lot more intelligent in that sense to say, well, we know this is page likes, so you probably want to see page likes over time. Immediately, we can start proposing more intelligent visualizations, right? And this concept of data lineage is very important, right? It's not just because of knowing, okay, this data comes from there, but also to be more intelligent along the way. On the data transformation side, if you're trying to merge a Facebook with Twitter and to create a social media, join view of your data to get a bit of a social reputation, again, there's intelligence there to say, well, I know what this column is and I know where that column is, so I'll propose that join for them already, right? They don't have to think about those things. So that type of intelligence in a decoupled situation is very difficult. It has all to be programmer driven, right? Because the programmer at that stage does not know where the data came from. It has been decoupled. So they have to add that intelligence themselves to those interfaces. So that's kind of the issue, is exactly that. The second one related to that is updates. I mean, Facebook changes their API pretty much on a monthly basis, adds columns, removes columns, adds a new endpoint, terminates a new version, etc. The effort involved in that is quite large to keep up with them, right? Now imagine doing that across all the cloud platforms that we support. Where a decoupled situation becomes a very, very tough, because if the beginning breaks, everything else breaks, right? So again, it's important that your system is built in such a way that it's coupled, not because people think, oh, you decouple to minimize breaks, but in fact, it's the opposite here. You couple, in our case, so that you can continue to work with the new data, irrespective of the fact that the first piece has not worked, because we can either circumvent that, or the data warehouse and the dashboarding still continues operating after that fact. So that's in an intra-company situation. On an extra-company situation, the intelligence that we can give by having this data coupled is also quite interesting for us. And again, I'm going to give you a bit of a case scenario here, for instance, where let's say you have two accountants using a platform such as ours. And the first one, gets an account, starts building an awesome dashboard out of their, QuickBooks data and a few other systems potentially, right? And they build a great dashboard. And the system is learning at the same time. It's saying, okay, this person has built a dashboard that looks like this and this from QuickBooks. Can we utilize that? Not obviously the exact data, but can we utilize that for the next accountant that comes in and connect similar looking data onto our system? Have you tried building a chart that looks like that, right? So these kind of auto-suggestion, right, that we see everywhere in Google search and so forth, but we have not done that best of practice in terms of visualization. We're all building the same charts for over 50 years. It's always the same. A P&L. How many times do we have to build a P&L? How many times do we need to build a chart that sales over time? It's always the same chart. Can we be a bit smarter and say, oh, I know this data. It's coupled. I know what it is. So most likely, and based on the experience of other users, I believe this is the right visualization for this. And the third is the actual data identification itself. I think we can also do a lot smarter things around the identification, where even though we may not know exactly the data, for example, if you load an Excel with column names in Japanese, the data is all in Japanese, you as a data analyst, you may not know Japanese. How do you know what that represents? There's a lot of metadata classifications, opendata.org type of things, Wikipedia, there's a lot of data sources, Wikimedia and so forth, that we can start tapping into to DNA the data and kind of say, oh, even though I don't know where this data came from, I can kind of figure out that it has these characteristics, which, by the way, are the same characteristics as other data, which I do know for. So maybe it is similar data. And these type of auto-suggestions and proposals quickly advance the work of a business analyst, a data scientist, or just a normal business user in terms of achieving what they want to achieve in the end.
Can you talk a bit more about the workflow for somebody who's using ClicData to go from, I'm a new customer, I want to get set up, to I have, these various sources of data loaded into the system. These are the dashboards I want to build, and maybe talk through a bit of some of the feedback mechanisms that you've built into the platform to be able to look at a chart and say, this isn't actually what I want to do. I want to input some additional information and have that update these projections.
Right. From the point in time that you start a trial with ClicData, you get an account set up, you pick your region, you have a couple of systems to connect. We're talking about 30 minutes to a couple of hours of work. Again, if you have the keys to the data, your data sits in a platform that is credentials, you have the credentials and so forth, you can get your data into ClicData in a fairly quick manner. We can talk about volume of data and how much data you have, et cetera, but I'm talking typical terms of a medium-sized business where we're talking 5 million rows. They can get that up on their first day within ClicData. Once the data is there, it's a question of understanding what do they want to do. And I think that's the most difficult part for anyone, is to say, okay, I have all this data. What do I want to do? What am I interested in? And a lot of people start from the fact of going from data to develop metrics. I have this data. What metrics can I develop, right? And that, to me, is actually the wrong way to go about it, because you can load a table of data with 50 columns. There's a lot of metrics there that you could do. There's a lot of different variations. That is not as important as to understand, okay, what do I want to know about this topic, my business situation, my sales, logistics, whatever the subject matter is. I always recommend turn off the screen, grab a piece of paper and draw it a little bit, sketch it. What would you like to see in front of you every morning when you wake up, when you're getting your coffee? Like, Telmo, you run ClicData. What is the first thing you want to know? Well, I want to know how many customers joined yesterday. I want to know, how much new revenue we've generated, how many customers we've lost. So you start defining your key indicators to say, these are the topics that matter to me. If you're obviously in a more operational or a departmental position, then your metrics may be a little bit more detailed and more expanded. But in essence, the work is the same. You have to sit down and think, okay, this is what I want to see. And now you kind of say, okay, does my data support that? Right? My data have the elements. So that's the time that it will take one of our users or customers to think about what they really want to do with ClicData, because it just opens that door, say, oh, okay, so that was pretty easy to bring all my data in, but now what do I do with it, right? So they always start with our tool thinking that's going to be a challenge for them. And then when they see the data, they kind of go, okay, now what do I do with this, right? And they start creating all kinds of fancy dashboards and all that. And pretty much it becomes a jumble of charts and indicators, as opposed to thinking about it, okay, let's think from the top down and see, what do I want to see? And that, again, it depends on the type of customer, their experience as well. Listen, dashboard, BI as a whole, and dashboard, I'm not going to sit here and say, it's all kind of automated and is easy and, it's point and click. We all know that's not true. There are cases where, you're trying to calculate last 30 days average sales, medium, whatever. That's a formula. You need to know your formulas, right? It's like Excel. It's easy to say cell A plus cell B equals, that's the sum. That's great. But it's not as easy to do a regression, a linear regression, or, kind of a VLOOKUP. So there's different levels of expertise and there's different levels of needs. So again, it depends what they're trying to do. Are they trying to do dashboards that are very interactive, that you have like 50 filters and based on those filters is going to calculate some metrics and some forecasting and it allows them to change some variables. So it really depends on the needs. There's not one specific use case that I can tell you. Yeah, it could be as easy as a couple days, or it could be, as complex to implement as 2 or 3 weeks. However, what we can assure is that you definitely don't need, 500 tools to do that. And you don't need, to contact different vendors. And it's all one tool, all one platform, and all supported centrally.
Modern data teams are dealing with a lot of complexity in their data pipelines and analytical code. Monitoring data quality, tracing incidents, and testing changes can be daunting and often takes hours to days or even weeks. By the time errors have made their way into production, it's often too late and the damage is done. Datafold's proactive approach to data quality helps data teams gain visibility and confidence in the quality of their analytical data through data profiling, column-level lineage, and intelligent anomaly detection. Datafold also helps automate regression testing of ETL code with its data diff feature that instantly shows how a change in ETL or BI code affects the produced data, both on a statistical level and down to individual rows and values. Datafold integrates with all major data warehouses, as well as frameworks such as Airflow and dbt, and seamlessly plugs into CI workflows. Visit dataengineeringpodcast.com/Datafold today to book a demo with Datafold. In terms of the sort of data modeling that you're doing, you mentioned being able to, add multiple filters to the dashboard so you can, slice and dice the data in different ways. And I know that one of the challenges that often comes up with business intelligence is you set out with the intention of answering one question, and then you realize from that answer, okay, here are 15 other questions that I want to ask. And then you go and say, okay, well, now how do I ask and answer these questions? And the answer is, oh, well, that's going to require some additional work because we don't have all that data, or the schema isn't structured in a way that makes that, feasible given the computations that need to happen. And I'm wondering how you approach some of those challenges of allowing people to do this exploration of the data in a ad hoc and iterative fashion while still making sure that it is sort of performant and well structured and maintainable over the long run.
Absolutely. That was one of our largest challenges. And I got to be honest, ClicData at its current stage is still, I would say, more of a business reporting tool rather than a data exploration tool, right? We're not SPSS. We're not even Tableau in the terms of, oh, here's a data set. What kind of stuff and patterns can I see? We start from the point of view that we're trying to support the business in having decent metrics in front of them every single day, but they need to know what those metrics are. They need to know what they're looking for. We are building a new module called Insights as well that will assist with that. But nonetheless, the idea of us building a dashboard and then, taking your example, showing it to the business users and the business users challenging it and saying, well, now it'd be better if it was this, this, and this, and you having to go back to the data model scared us because I've been there. I've done that. And that requires the rebuilding of pretty much all your data dimension model, your hierarchy, and so forth. And we don't want to do that. So we don't. There's at no point in ClicData will you have to say, this is a metric, this is a hierarchical dimension, this is a dimension X, Y, and Z. When you load data into ClicData, we immediately launch parallel processes to basically index every single column you have in a columnar store indexing. So however you want to look at it, that's how you're going to look at it. It's quite fast to do aggregations from that standpoint. And this is happening behind the scenes. And we're building these mini index and clustered stores all over the place on every single column almost every single column. We don't do columns greater than 4,000 characters for performance reasons, but every single column you throw in there, we do a columnar store index. And it seems expensive and it seems almost non-intelligent, almost blunt, a brute force kind of way of doing things. But that's because exactly, I don't know what the user is going to ask down the stream, right? Down the stream, he may want to aggregate on this column. And I don't have to want to go back all the way to the beginning to, turn on a little option to create that or to aggregate based on that. So we do that behind the scenes, and this is where we gain the performance. This is where we kind of make that already table available. We also fought very hard at the beginning this concept of saying, every business was saying, oh, we hate data silos. We hate data silos. I say, you know what? We kind of love data silos in a sense. We actually went, the other way. And sure enough, recent years have proved this in a sense right, where data lakes are exactly that. I should call them more like, garbage dumps, really, because you throw everything into a data lake, right? And then you sort it out after. That's how we saw ClicData very early on. We said, yeah, you just put tables all over the place, and you don't have to define the relationships between them offhand. You don't have to define the dimensions. You'll define them as you go along. And once we learn there's a relationship, then we'll use it going forward. So those are the type of things that we kind of did to make sure that we avoid, that cycle of, redefining your data model all the time and going back to all your interfaces to adopt that.
Another interesting element of your platform is that you're providing the storage layer for the business intelligence system. And I'm wondering if you can talk through some of the security and regulatory challenges that brings on and some of the ways that you have to work with customers to sort of build up their confidence and trust in your capacity to be able to be effective stewards of their data.
That's obviously foremost priority on our side. The minute we have some sort of disaster, whether, natural or not, that's the end, most likely, of our type of business, right? So one of the reasons why we obviously went with either Amazon or Azure was because we wanted to have that first layer of infrastructure highly secure. So the physical security that would be there from the get-go. We don't work with anybody else. We then worked a lot on all the data is encrypted. That's also non-negotiable in transit, internally in transit, and externally in transit through HTTPS. And then we worked on a lot of other security in terms of how our applications themselves work with the databases and how they access the customer's database. And one of the things we did early on was we launched in two poles. We launched in Europe, which is hosted out of Ireland, and we launched in the US, which is hosted out of the East Coast. And those are our two major poles. But soon enough, we had customers in countries in France, in Germany, in Canada that basically said, no, our data has to be hosted. And this led us to think, okay, well, let's start another cluster there. But starting a cluster in a new region is costly for us. And so we start thinking about what if, the customer is okay with the data in transit, encrypted, going through some services outside of the country, but their data is stored in their country. And then we start coming up with this approach of having the customers almost hosting the data themselves so that they feel secure. They hold the encryption keys to the database, but they give the application still, it's a cloud application, but they still work with their database. So we're working with some customers on that if they are concerned on that. Now we host clusters as well in these other countries as well. So those are things that we've been working very hard to make sure that we can ensure that the customers understand that our focus here is to make sure that their data is secured the maximum possible. You could say you're HIPAA compliant, you can say that you are GDPR compliant, but all these are just words, right? Until you actually put in place policies and processes and almost bake it in to your code and automation in such a way that even if somebody wants to or forgets to follow a certain procedure, that the system will do it. So this is really where we try to kind of work on. We don't try to do one-offs. We always look at it and saying, okay, but next month we'll have to do it again. So let's make sure that it doesn't happen again. This continuous process and evolution, it has to be baked into mostly into the people rather than the technology, because all you need is that one weak link. and then everything crumbles, right? One of the things we did early on with ClicData started with, basically a freemium version of ClicData. Believe it or not, over a space of 12 months, we got 30,000 accounts running on ClicData. And we used that, with the caveats of freemium to learn a lot about security, about scalability, about infrastructure, about how our application was behaving and what potentially, holes, we needed to gap very quickly. So that gave us a lot of insight as well in terms of the security portion of it as well.
In your work of building up the ClicData business and being able to serve this business intelligence market, I'm wondering what were some of the ideas or assumptions that you had going into it that have been changed or challenged either as you explored the problem space more fully or as technologies evolved and requirements evolved, and maybe some of the particularly thorny engineering challenges that you faced along the way?
I think one of the assumptions was that I thought everybody, coming from the enterprise world and working with BI and other enterprise levels, I came into ClicData thinking that everybody understood BI clearly and what it is and what it's supposed to do. And that is not true. And it's not to say they're wrong or right or that they don't understand this or that. It's just that it was just a wrong assumption. I thought everybody understood that you needed a data warehouse to do proper BI and to keep your historical data. And, either through mass marketing from other data viz companies or whatever, they felt that that was never really a topic, that ETL was a bad word, it was too technical, and yet it's something that we need to do to cleanse the data. That's the process. You can call it whatever you want. And, I thought coming in that everybody knew that, medium, small size business. And that's not true. That's obviously not true, especially some of our customers, which are focused on their business as they should be. That's not of their interest. They just want those dashboards and the insights at the end of the day. There was a lot of assumptions around, the value that we would bring by bringing an all-in-one platform right off the get-go, right? That people would see that benefit right away. And again, through marketing and potentially miscommunication, basically training, we spent a lot of time, teaching what BI is. And it's almost like, if you're trying to sell your product to a customer and your product is cloud and this customer is on premise 100%, do you really should even spend the effort there, right? Are they going to change their mind that cloud is for them? We said right off the get-go, no, we have to work with customers that are advanced enough in their thinking that they've chosen cloud as a solution for them and they want to move to the cloud. And therefore, our application is appropriate for them. So it's picking your battles as well. Those assumptions that I thought, oh yeah, of course everybody wants to go to cloud. Why wouldn't they? Well, no, they may have very good reasons to stay a little bit behind on premise or even not a cloud, but some kind of a private cloud. And all those assumptions are, for me, kind of defined a new path within ClicData to either provide options for that or sometimes just to say, well, no, we can't be that, right? We can't offer that. So
in your experience of building the product and working with your customers, what are some of the most interesting or innovative or unexpected ways that you've seen ClicData used?
I've seen dashboards, which are mini apps, iPhone apps, highly interactive iPhone apps they've built. I've seen a Pong game being built on a dashboard. I've seen a lot of people on their free trials, young students, entire classes of students creating very creative dashboards about topics which are, they stand out from normal business topics. One of our support team members comes to me and shows me, oh, look at this dashboard. This is great. The customer showed me this and they need help with this. I felt it was a really good dashboard. And we look at it and it's typically business data, right? Trying to help them solve some kind of a calculation error or something like that. And every now and then we got these dashboards on, Pokemon stats and stuff like that, and PUBG stats. This type of thing that you go, oh wow, this is even being used for other areas, right? We've seen our dashboards being built for hospital for tracking inventory at hospitals on tablets, which is not typically something that you'd see a dashboard used for, but because they can do it, they do it. It's a tool like any other. We've seen people that just don't think about our visualization at all, but they love our data aggregation capabilities and connectivity and data warehouse, and they plug Python and R into it, and they go nuts in terms of advanced statistical analysis or machine learning, whatever you want to call it, and do very cool things with it. And some of the projects that were shown to me were impressive, like beyond impressive. We had one that did sentiment analysis. So with only using our web service connector and our API, and I found that impressive as well. So all these things, they continue to surprise me because it's just outside of what I'm usually seeing. From a technical point, it's really cool as well because they're using things, it's like finding a little Easter egg somewhere. It's like, they found that, did they? And they found out to use that, did they? Okay, that's cool. So that's pretty cool.
As you have been building and growing the company, what are some of the most interesting or unexpected or challenging lessons that you've learned in the process?
That's a loaded question, Tobias. That's a lot of stuff. I mean, we could go into investors all the way to fundraising to dealing with engineering and sales. Yeah, there's so much. I mean, I think ultimately what I love is the fact that we're building something. It's like anything else, right? I think this entire startup movement started because people just love to create, right? That's human beings. We love to create, right? Whatever it is. And programmers, especially, I think a lot of developers get into it because they can mold computers into doing whatever they want it to do, right? It's almost that power that says, I can do this. Oh, can I do this? It's also the challenge as well. And that is the driving principle still with ClicData is, can we, as the little guys of ClicData, we're being compared on media with Tableaus and Lookers and Oracles and Domos, companies that are billion-dollar valuations. And I'm going, what? How is this possible, right? And I think ultimately it's just because, that passion of just creating something absolutely incredible and as large as we are trying to build it is still there. But the challenges have been many, obviously. We're fighting the big guys. So they have a lot more money than we do. We're not known, and this is why we're thankful for opportunities like these podcasts that allow us to kind of, without spending millions, to share our vision and to talk to interesting people and to discuss whatever topics related to data and BI and technology that we can. We had challenges in terms of ensuring that we're a small company providing a huge data service across the world. How do we support such a large scale? We're present in over 50 countries. The US is definitely our biggest country. How do we make sure that we support all these customers across the world in all these data centers from Microsoft? And how can we manage that in such an effective way? All those have been challenges, right? And doing that as well without just thinking, just throw more money at it. That's always a solution, right? But I think we can do better than that. I think we can be smarter than that, right? We're engineers. It's always about cost effectiveness, not just about throwing money at it, right?
Absolutely. It's always about the time, cost, and space trade-offs.
Absolutely.
And so for people who are looking to be able to build up a reliable business intelligence capability, what are the cases where ClicData is the wrong choice?
I think ClicData is the wrong choice if, for example, you're in a high volume, high transactional data scenario, right? If you're a telecommunications company, for example, where you have literally thousands per millisecond texts, you're not going to be using ClicData to store those transactions. You may want to use a large scale parallel database, even large scale, potentially things such as BigQueries and other technologies for that, and kind of aggregate that data to a level that is digestible for ClicData, right? Again, we're trying to make insights, not data exploration, and not start detecting text patterns and things like that. That's not us. We're not an SPSS or a statistical advanced tool. Don't think you're going to come here and start writing Python. You can, but that will be on your machine and you can hit your data on ClicData. But we don't have that facility. Machine learning is kind of a step for us. We do provide certain basic functionality for statistical analysis, trending and segmentation, things like that. But more advanced than that, you'll have to kind of look elsewhere, which is not to say that ClicData cannot feed that, right? You can still collect the data from the different sources and then provide that data to those tools. So those are basically the two main reasons, that, ClicData is probably not the right tool for you as well. Of course, the third one, but that goes without saying, if you're looking for an on-premise solution, we're not it. That you'll have to look elsewhere. We're fully cloud, and we don't provide that on-premise.
And as you continue to work on the business and iterate on the technology and the feature set that you're providing, what are some of the things that you have planned for the near to medium term?
Well, interesting enough, we have a huge release November 30th and then another one planned for February 15th. And in both those releases, we're launching 3 new modules of ClicData. One of them is called reports. Do you remember reports? Reports are those multi-page, financial statements, that somebody would just dump on your desk. And you think this day and age with data analysis and spreadsheets and people would just get away from that. But we've had so many requests. Dashboards are great, but they're single page focused, right? You have to navigate through them. I want to deliver a list of clients, that's 3, 4, 5, 7 pages long with their addresses and their value or something like that. That type of report building, which we used to have tools like Crystal Reports and Business Objects had a portion like that, and we had a few other tools like that. That's what we're building. We're launching that module. It's an awesome designer. I think there's some cool innovations from the traditional report designers that we've always had. You can build that and publish it the same way we do dashboards, produce PDFs that you can download or stream to your browser. That's pretty exciting. Nothing new, but this is a surprise for me as well. We stopped designing ClicData based on our imagination and what we wanted to do with it, and we started listening to our customers a few years ago and asking them, okay, where do you want us to take? And this report module was one of those things. The next one is the data stream. Data stream was actually released a month ago, but we have some improvements to do there. The same way we can automate the ingestion of data into ClicData, we can now automate the push of data to outside systems. So you can use ClicData to aggregate all your data from the different systems. And now, every 5 minutes, plop the file on an FTP server or add a few rows of data to, some database on the cloud, or to pop an Excel into a Dropbox or something like that. ClicData then becomes is now a full kind of data treatment, data management tool, irrespective of whether it has visualization or not, right? Some people don't want visualization. They just want, get all this data, clean it up, add these calculations, and now put a file from my vendor on this folder every day, and that's all they want. So we're going to have that piece done as well. I believe I touched briefly on Insights, and Insights is our exploration data tool. And now the difference with Insights is that from a dashboard or some of the other tools we have, is that you start from a set of data and you can start dragging columns in and immediately see scatter plots or pivot tables or line charts, depending on the type of columns you drag into. And it immediately adapts to the data that you dropped into, as opposed to saying, okay, I want to build a scatter plot, and then it's going to just put the dots in it. Our first version is going to be a classic exploration tool. We're hopefully going to improve it to make it a lot more smart in that sense, where it starts changing the visualization based on the type of columns that you throw at it. So those are the 3 modules that we're working on and delivery over the next 2 releases as well.
And are there any other aspects of the work that you're doing at ClicData or the market for business intelligence that we didn't discuss yet that you'd like to cover before we close out the show?
One actually interesting question. I'd love to know how people view machine learning specifically. What I usually call advanced statistical analysis, which is basically extrapolation of data or segmentation of data, or treating the data and creating models and then applying those models to the bulk of the data. Is that something that should be part of BI in a sense? At which point do we say BI is just historical data and reporting on that, analytics on that? And at which point do we say, let's do some kind of forward-looking activities here that can extrapolate that data? I'm always concerned that, it's being treated as 2 separate topics. And sometimes I see it as a single topic, which is data is data is data. You're just working with data one way or the other, So we're trying to kind of create our own, opinion of where machine learning sits in this entire process, right? We have some ideas. I'd love to hear more as well, whether there's going to be a comment section here on what people think, at which point does machine learning and data science differs from business intelligence? And maybe is it time right now to stop putting these labels on these things and just call this data? something. I don't know what that something is, but data something. We know it's about data viz, it's about data aggregation, data connectivity, data management, statistics, data, calculations, whatever it is, right? It's still a very interesting topic for me because from a product perspective, I'm trying to see where it fits in the grand scheme of things. I would love to build a Python plugin. And, it's a challenge to see where, is it really something that people will think that belongs into our platform, or whether they will think, no, this doesn't belong here. I'd rather use it elsewhere. So that's something that is going forward does this really fit into ClicData in the future?
Well, for anybody who wants to get in touch with you and follow along with the work that you're doing, I'll have you add your preferred contact information to the show notes. And as a final question, I'd like to get your perspective on what you see as being the biggest gap in the tooling or technology that's available for data management today.
I don't know if it's a gap or not, or whether it's a limitation of our own technology based on what we can do. But I think it's at the point in time where you'll be hard pressed finding data sets that are low in volume. It's becoming quite large, this number of data sets and the number of rows in each data or documents or items you have in your data set. And yet we're still limited by technology and by hardware specifically at times on things like million rows and memory and things like that. And you figure by this time we would have figured out how to improve that, right? We're constantly challenged using your browser to display to our customers, a scatter plot with more than 1 million points, right? Why is that? We understand not everybody has, an RTX 3080 Ti graphics card, but the browser itself will not even support it. So that is the largest limitation right now. We're still not capable, unless you have a super duper, infrastructure and all closed off, top level network stuff and disks and whatnot. We solved the problem of storage by compression and other methods. And right now we can get SSD drives to incredible sizes, but we still can't digest more than a few million rows at a time, or at least present them in a way that, in a visual way. I think there's a challenge there. I know this is not exactly data management as you asked, but to us, it kind of belongs to that piece as well, because a lot of the data management we try to do is in memory. And it's challenging to try to, look at just a few millions of rows when we know there's more rows outside that we still need to take into consideration. So yeah, that's one of the biggest items we have. Yeah, I don't know if we have any specific gaps. I think we have a lot of challenges.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to join me and share the work that you're doing at ClicData and your perspective on the business intelligence market. It's definitely a very interesting and storied problem domain. So I appreciate the time and energy you're putting into it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me.
Listening. Don't forget to check out our other show, podcast.init, at pythonpodcast.com to learn about the Python language, its community, and the innovative ways it is being used. And visit the site at dataengineeringpodcast.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the mailing list, and read the show notes. If you've learned something or tried out a project from the show, then tell us about it. Email hosts at dataengineeringpodcast.com with your story. And to help other people find the show, please leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends and coworkers.